Podcast. Dedicated to the underdog, cause I see you. Working on your craft, getting strong, cause I see you. Ready to set it off and on, cause I see you. Correcting all that is wrong, cause I see you.
My name is Jesus Azteca 500 Sanchez. I am the host of the 500 and Growing podcast. I'm really excited about the guest that we have today. We have Kerrie Anne Grace. Kerrie Anne Grace is a seasoned performer, educator. She's a choreographer. She earned her BFA in theater arts. She founded Forevermore. They've been around for 20 years, so it's since 2014. Is that 2004?
Yep.
And so one of the things that is incredible about that space is that my daughters both attend Forevermore. They do ballet, and when they do the shows, they're like really big and they have really intricate costumes, or what would you call them? Yeah, there are costumes.
Mm-hmm.
They're costumes, and it's incredible to see these young people, especially my daughters, because I get to see the transformation of them being on stage and like learning how to be okay being in front of a whole bunch of people and performing. I think that it's really important for young people to know how to do that so that they don't get nervous when they're in front of people. And so they also share something that they've been practicing, and the discipline of like making that routine something that they're able to share with other people. And I think that it really builds the community. And so I've had people in the community that I've met that I'm like, oh yeah, so my kid goes to Forevermore. Oh, your kid goes to Forevermore. And we have that commonality. So everybody, please give a big round of applause for Kerrie Anne Grace that founded Forevermore. All right. So how are you doing, Kerrie?
I am fantastic. It was the solar eclipse today.
It was a solar eclipse.
It was so cool.
Yeah.
Good
The one thing is that
vibes.
we didn't, yeah, for sure. But man, I wish we would have been
In
like
the totality.
a little bit to the south, because the totality must have been incredible. Yeah. So let's get into it.
Yeah.
How did you grow up, and what was your childhood like? Like, where did you grow up?
Where did I grow up? So I'm from the Chicagoland area.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in Arlington Heights at Northwest Community Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents, when I was an infant, lived in Palatine.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think got their first bigger place, a townhouse in Elgin. I am a product of the 70s through and through.
Okay.
If you watched a sitcom about hippie parents raising a kid,
Okay.
that was me. Some of my earliest memories are all the long hair and tie-dye and bell-bottoms and a big circle with everybody playing guitar and singing, and
So they were groovy.
they were very groovy.
And the whole thing is that I imagine like having hippie parents, like they had to have thought outside the box right off. Like
Yes.
they inculcated that into you. They were just like this social ladder, this power struggle that's happening between the people who are in control of the country, and like what's happening in the racism, and all that had to have been something that's common language in your household at that time.
Absolutely. And I was the kid that was encouraged to color on the walls,
Nice.
like the opposite of everything
Yeah.
that we know about raising kids.
Okay.
I really did have that super duper hippie upbringing
Mhm.
as a very young child, but I had my family went through something very challenging when I was only 2.5. They had a baby who died
Okay.
of SIDS.
Oh man, I'm sorry to hear that.
It was I don't have super clear memories, but I know that I found the baby, and it was in the house. It was a tragedy and
Okay.
heartbreaking
Okay.
for my parents.
So you're talking about like, so you found it like,
in the crib. Yeah,
Oh,
he
okay.
had died of SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome.
That must have been incredibly traumatizing for you.
You know, as a young child, I don't think you understand death. And it certainly had a huge impact on me, and I can share where it followed to.
Yeah.
I remember being at the service for him, and because I was a small child, my father's mom had me upstairs in the loft at the church and was pointing to the big, beautiful crucifix in the cathedral. Baby Adam's with baby Jesus now. And I'm looking at the crucifix and this like horrible, painful looking image up there. And I started to cry, and she's like, he's with baby Jesus. And I think that started my questioning of what I believed, even at a very, very young age. And I spent a lot of my childhood exploring different faiths.
Okay.
I was raised Catholic, and
So was I.
very much a spiritual person, and God is a part of my life. I don't go to church, but I think that I was a coexist human being, like the bumper sticker.
Yeah.
Just by birthright, being raised by hippies, and having had that experience as a young child, questioning, and that carried on to like Sunday school, CCD.
So they were like hippies, but they were like doing traditional Catholic stuff.
Grandma did.
Oh, okay, yeah, I see.
And unfortunately, my parents split up by the time I was 4. I think that the death was very hard. They were young parents, and such a tragedy. And my father had addiction issues, drugs and alcohol, and I think my mom was
enough
trying to figure out what to do with this baby and her grief.
Yes.
And she kind of ran off and couldn't really make it on her own, so she had to go back to mom and dad, which was not what she wanted to do. But I'm very grateful she did, because I had kind of the best of both worlds. Yes, what my childhood was like. I had absolute freedom, autonomy to figure out who I was and what I wanted to be. But then I also had somebody that made sure I was fed and clothed and knew how to follow rules and go to school.
Okay.
Super responsible. And my grandparents did a lot for me.
Okay.
I didn't live with them for more than about a year, but I spent a lot of time with them.
That connection that you made had to have been like something that lasted even after you,
of course,
didn't live with them anymore.
So close with my grandparents.
And then I'm also curious, what kind of person were you in school? Like you said, you weren't the jock, you weren't were you like the cool person that was like?
No, I wasn't.
Were you
cool.
the nerdy person?
No, I was like this weird, part invisible, part friends with everyone.
Okay.
I don't know
so
what kind of sitcom they could make.
You would just like float around.
I was the peacemaker.
Okay.
I was a peacemaker.
Okay.
But I was also, I had my moments of being a little weird. I told you my mom worked at battered women's shelters, and high-end designer clothing stores would give donations to the shelters. Well, the like weird tiny sizes didn't fit anybody. So my mom would give me these like just odd pieces of clothing. So I had my own kind of strange fashion sense. So maybe I was the weirdo, and I just never saw myself as the weirdo. I don't know.
How do you think? Yeah, like how do you think? Yeah, that's wild. I was the quiet kid. I was the quiet kid that liked making art, but would also like fight. If I needed to fight, I would fight, and so people knew, and so they kind of stayed away from me. So I wasn't bullied, but then I would also stand up for the kids that were being bullied, and yeah, I remember standing up, and I would hang out with those kids, and we would be cool. That's the type of person I was, the quiet kid.
Well, when I reflect on it, I'm super grateful that I've always had an ability to connect with lots of different kinds of people. Was raised colorblind, gender blind, like just, again, like truly the epitome of coexist.
Yeah.
And I had friends of all different ethnicities and faiths, and I made my rounds. Like each week I would go check it out, and I would listen, and I thought every single religion had beautiful things. And I thought everybody's trying to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
How can they all be right?
Yeah.
And
they're trying to explain what we can't explain.
do you remember, I know I'm a lot older than you, but there was a TV show called The Dinosaurs. They were Jim Henson puppets.
No, I don't remember.
Oh,
well, tell me about it.
You'll have to look up this episode because this is the epitome of humanity and not being able to answer questions and why are we the way we are. So in the dinosaur town, they all had like people jobs and construction worker, and they were arguing about something, and they were picketing, and they had signs.
They were striking.
They were striking. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they had signs that said, "We are right, war," and like the two sides holding up. And I remember thinking, that's the problem with mankind. Everybody thinks they're right. And it's the same thing as a kid growing up that I realized about religion. And I enjoy listening to anyone speak and tell stories. I'm very interested in, I think that religion and churches are beautiful. They create fellowship, they create community, they give people a sense of purpose.
Community?
I have a hard time, and this was a theme that carried on throughout my whole life. When people are judged so harshly for what they believe, it makes me question the judgers. I can remember marching with friends in the Pride Parade, being spit at and garbage thrown at me. And then when my children were little, they're teenagers now, I had them in their little double stroller marching in the Pride Parade, and people screaming in my face and at my children, and that I was going to go to hell and burn. And
so what did that make you feel like when they were saying those things to you?
It was just absurd to me. And I was a full grown adult then. I was in my 30s.
Okay.
At that point, but I've witnessed this throughout my life, and it's something interesting about me. I believe that people are innately good. Like, to a fault, with all my being. I see the good in everyone, even the people who were spitting at me. I am a diehard optimist for sure. But I'm also, I think, an advocate and protector. And I think throughout my life, I've had multiple encounters where, even though I'm not, I would not call myself an activist by any means, because I don't, back to the "we are right" sign, like, I don't think we stop war with war. I don't think we stop hate with hate. But I also clearly see the boundary when somebody is intolerant of differences. That the black and white is a big, huge theme for me. I feel like the way is in the middle. That gray.
Sure. And I think that, so your experience and like how you were like your hippie mom and how you were exposed to that is the same type of experience that I had with hip hop. So with hip hop, I grew up in Little Village my whole life, especially on the South Side. It's very like island off. So like communities, like you have the Mexican community here, the Black community here, the Polish community here, the Irish community here. And so hip hop got me to get on the bus and get on the train and then come to the North Side and like find the Filipinos and like, you know, be in a party where everybody learned how to break dance, and we were gonna go show it off, and it was just like, or we were gonna MC or DJ or whatever it was, right? Like hip hop brought us into a space together, and it wasn't about what you looked like. It was about how good you were.
Mm.
So it was just like, how good could you dance? Like if you were a good dancer, it didn't matter. People, as soon as you got out of the circle, were like, yo, that was dope, man. That was dope. And you'd form relationships like that. And so hip hop definitely did that for our generation, where it was just like it brought us together in a room. How did it bring you into that space?
Well,
as a young person,
saying that the arts are a common denominator. Like it takes away our differences. It's equal, and it becomes about something outside of yourself. Yes, maybe it's your talent or the energy that you bring through whatever your art is. I definitely, growing up, I didn't belong to any one group. I didn't understand what it was to, be a jock or, be a scholar. I had friends who were athletes. I had friends who were scholars. I had friends who were skater dudes. I had people who barely spoke English from all around the world. Like just this huge melting pot of people are people. And when I became a middle school teenager, you kind of stand out if you don't belong to a particular group. And I think I kept finding myself drawn into the arts, all different outlets within the arts, because that was a place that it didn't matter who you were. It was about the art itself, and it didn't matter if you were this or that. It's probably a huge piece of how I ended up doing what I do with my life is I want people to come together. I want people to know that we're all unique, but we can come together. I definitely can relate to what you're saying, how hip hop gave you that opportunity to expand.
Yeah,
like that's the purpose of life is expansion. We're here to grow.
Especially at a like formative years, right? Like we're talking about like going into teenage years where I was already writing poetry. I was already drawing. My mom would force me to do the ballet folklorico. So I'd have to dress up and dance, and the teacher was always making me dance with the teacher as an example. So you can be like, oh, we're gonna do this, and then Jesus, come over here, and we're gonna show everybody. But I hated it.
You hated it? The attention.
I gotta, and then I gotta make mistakes in front of people.
Ooh.
So that was the thing. It was like I'm the guinea pig. So I'm gonna make mistakes, and everybody's gonna see me make mistakes. So I don't get the advantage of being able to scope out what's gonna happen and then be like, okay, so that's how you do it, and this is what you need to look out for. I was doing it in front of people, and I was always, I guess my mom, I always think of my mom, and my mom was like, kind of, she made it seem like it was like I needed to be perfect. She was like, you need to make sure you have your hair nice. You have to make sure your shoes are clean. Like girls aren't going to want to talk to you if you don't have clean shoes. And so it was just like that Mexicanism that's like really like, you have to make sure you comb your hair. You got to make sure that you look presentable. But I never realized that now I'm making that connection that she put me in a situation where it was like, there was no way to be perfect. You know, she was a single mom and she loved dancing. And so what would happen was the cumbias would come on and I would be sitting there and she would be like grabbing my hand and dancing with me, but also like telling me in a way I couldn't understand because I'm breakdancing at this point, right? So I know how to dance. But she was like, okay, feel the rhythm in my hand. And I'm like, my hand has nothing to do with my feet. You know, like show me how to move my feet. And so it's crazy. I became a pretty good dancer of cumbias and like Latin rhythms. after my mom passed away in 2006, my wife and I took classes, and it was just like, it like, they taught it in a way that like, it was like the Matrix. I was just like,
Unlocked.
I understand. Now I understand. And although I was doing a good job, I was still faking the funk when I was dancing with my mom. I wasn't really feeling it like I could have.
Cool.
Yeah, man.
But, that's a great story.
Yeah, but that was my mom, man. My mom was the first person at the party. So she was punctual. And so what would happen was everybody would be getting there, and there would be no tables. And so the teenager, what does he have to do? Hey, go get the tables, put the tables out, put the chairs out, right? And then at the end of the party, I was falling asleep on those tables and chairs. So she would hang out the whole night. She was she was a free spirit in that way, but very, very disciplined. But I mean, we kind of talked about this, but like, what did you see growing up that you wanted to change?
I was born in 73.
73. Okay. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
70s and 80s. I had the best of both worlds.
Okay. And so decades. you have like the free, like, child, wild flower child.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the 80s, which are super neoliberal capitalism.
Yep.
Which is like corporations are trying to pump you out of all your money. So how did you deal with that?
Oh boy. So the first thing that I can remember as a child wanting to change, I shared the death of my brother, was I just wanted to take my parents' pain away. Mm-hmm. Like, if I could see them happy.
Okay.
That was, my tunnel vision.
Yeah.
As a young child. But from there, whenever I saw the underdog, anybody being bullied or picked on, again, not in a bullying way, but I had like a natural diplomacy about me.
Yeah. And
I wasn't fearless. I would put myself in between the conflict.
Mm-hmm.
I was a peacemaker.
Okay.
Like, all I wanted was, hey, why are you picking on that person? Why are you doing that? Very vocal,
mm-hmm.
but not aggressive. I don't know how to explain it, but that was a huge, like, I just wanted people to be kind, and it got me in trouble. I remember a neighbor, her father was abusive, and they had white carpet, and I remember seeing blood on the floor.
Ooh.
And she told me he'd hit her so bad that she was bleeding, and I called the police.
Oh, man.
And then we had to live next door to this family for many years, which was not cool. But it was important to me to stand up for people's rights.
Yes.
Now.
Was that from your mom?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
My mom took in stray animals, stray people. She's got a pretty phenomenal story. She had very high IQ, but had dropped out of high school and ran away, got married, had me, whatever. Mm-hmm. And then when I was 7, she decided to go back to school, and she got her GED, her associates, her bachelor's, her master's, and into her doctorate, all in like 5 years.
Whoa.
She like
cranked it out.
And she went to school for social work.
Mm-hmm.
And she did a lot of internships in battered women's shelters.
Wow.
So besides the like religion that I found on my own, it's super important that I needed to understand what this thing was in the world. Mm-hmm. I was also being drug along to battered women's shelters. Like, I hung out with my mom at work.
Yeah.
And I'm a very empathic human being. I didn't understand what being a highly sensitive, empathic person was, but I certainly was absorbing all this suffering and pain and injustice that I saw growing up. And that definitely translated into my life growing up as a kid. So definitely wanted to see a change in how people treat each other. Probably back to like preschool, my first education experience was like a Baptist preschool in Texas. My mom had run off, and remember learning the golden rule. And as simple as that, treat others the way you want to be treated.
Yeah.
And that's what but that felt just and right and fair and like a law that should exist. And I kind of built my whole life around the golden rule.
Yeah. And not to forget about what you did, which was call the police. That had to have been like either you did it without thinking, or you thought about it a lot and did it. Either way, it's like that space of like standing up and being uncomfortable, you know. How old were you when that happened?
I was probably like 11.
Okay. So you were old enough to understand what was kind of going on.
Yeah.
Teenager you understand a little bit more, but yeah, so it was like that's incredible that you did that.
You know, and it was constant in my life, and something that I don't think about that often. I know one of my good friends, my freshman year of high school, was Muslim, and while she was fasting, she maybe had more smells coming out than normal, and the kids in gym class were like kicking her and spitting at her, and I, again, these big huge boys, I'm this tiny little girl. I was like, what is this? Why are you doing? You know, like stood up for myself, and who are you?
Yeah.
And then I think in health class freshman year, I picked gay rights, which in the 80s that wasn't a super popular topic.
Oh, for sure.
And then I'm not gay, but everybody thought I was because I was fighting for gay rights.
Yeah.
So again, not an activist, but an advocate for equality.
Yeah.
And I would have been a great teenager in today's time.
Yeah, you would have flourished.
But I was,
yeah, for sure. But your frame of mind has kind of led to the new generation feeling that space, or like being able to fill that space that you didn't have. You weren't afforded when you were younger, you know?
It's exciting to me.
Yeah.
That the world is changing.
For sure. In the language,
you
know, when we talk about God, it's like that language is very oppressive to women. I can't imagine living my whole life calling God him and being a woman. I mean, it makes me uncomfortable, and I'm a man, you know.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's weird how we've been conditioned to do certain things and we don't really question them. We just go along with it because it's something that's been happening for your parents did it, your parents' parents did it, your parents' parents did it, and you don't, you know, you fall in line. And so I was always the black sheep. I was always the person who kind of questioned things. And I think that's because I got picked on. I was the youngest out of all my cousins, or the second youngest, but I'm the one that got it the most. So it kind of made me question injustice from a young age because my cousins are picking on me. And so I had to stand up for myself. So family tells stories about that, but it not to take away from that moment when you stood up, you know, like that. So what happens? I'm curious as to what happened in the relationship within your friendship with that girl, and what happened to the relationship that you had with your neighbors now.
It's like a sitcom. We used to open up our bedroom windows and like talk across the driveway to each other, and her parents forbid us to be friends. Yeah, and I left home when I was 18, so I didn't have to deal with the aftermath of my action for as many years as my family did. Yeah. But they were the kind of neighbors that would call, you know, if the grass wasn't mowed on time, like
there was like a rage.
Yeah, like, and I've got brothers that I'm 12 and 18 years older than, so like anytime they were loud or causing trouble or left their bikes out, like the police were called so often on my family's household because
It was all your fault.
Up. Yeah. Yeah. Silly story, but yeah.
Is there anything that people misunderstand about you?
I think I misunderstood, like, my ability to be patient is sometimes misunderstood for, like, passiveness. And I guess, that's interesting because peace is passivity.
Yeah. Or like a pushover.
Yeah. I'm not a doormat at all. I'm pretty strong, independent human being. And
yeah, you'll get it if you need to.
Yeah. So that's where I just personally feel misunderstood sometimes. I definitely, as a female single mom entrepreneur, have dealt with stereotypes of being an artist, not being taken seriously as a businesswoman or being a dancer. My whole life, you're out in public talking to people. Oh, you're a dancer with a pole? Are you a stripper? Like,
men say that to you?
Oh my gosh, still to this day. Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's a very misunderstood art form. Like, the general population, people who are outside of the arts, think of dance as
because when I was going to school,
and
I would see the modern dancers dancing in that room.
Right, but it's kind of a tricky art form. It's changing with the popularity of TV shows about dance. But in general, there's that. I don't know, right after I got divorced, my ex-husband and I had started the studio together. And I had several different areas of my life at that time. Oh, are you going to close the studio? I'm like, what? I've been running this thing for 14 years already. I can't do it by myself.
Because you couldn't do it by
you're
yourself.
Not going to make it. Who's gonna take care of that? Yeah,
those sideways comments that people make, just expressing their opinion, but also like putting you down at the same time.
So that's a form of being misunderstood.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, no, I'm an artist and I'm a businesswoman. I work with kids. Like, you talked about how we refer to God as a he. We also, as a society, assume that CEOs are mostly men. Well, because statistically, there's way more male CEOs. I know there's plenty of research, in the workforce, people who work with women and children are not as valued.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. Like, if you work with women and children, that's not a real job. And during the pandemic, one of the things that made my blood boil was, what's essential and what's not essential. I was a non-essential business.
Yes.
And absolutely, a hospital was essential.
For sure.
A dance studio is not essential. But the work that I did with those kids on Zoom, that was essential. That was a lifeline for
sure.
children. So,
because they're staring at a wall. They're watching TV, right? Like they're zoning out, and so
it was a chance to connect and to be physical in their bodies. It was so important. It was the only normal thing for a lot of kids because we went to Zoom before CPS did. So for a good chunk of the families that I serve, we were the first social interaction that the kids were getting.
Okay. Yeah. Because we were in the lockdown, right? And during the lockdown, it was kind of like a time off. We
went online within, I think, 12 days.
Yeah. What made you go online? Like, what prompted you to go full force so fast?
I am a part of an organization called More Than Just Great Dancing, and I am so grateful to have a community of like-minded studio owners. We feel like even though we each have our own business, that we all work together to advocate for children. And the philosophy behind that organization is that dance and the arts teach life lessons, not just the art form.
Sure.
And we were able to kind of collaborate and come together very quickly to pivot and figure out how are we going to do this?
Yeah.
So we did it.
Yeah.
And luckily I was already relatively tech savvy in the business, and the business was already established. Like we knew what we were doing. We were using Zoom for some meetings already, so I knew what Zoom was.
Yeah. Yeah, but I remember before the pandemic, Zoom was used very sparingly.
Correct.
It wasn't like
Correct.
synonymous with now. It's like it's everyday life.
Yep.
Yeah, so that was a huge advantage to have that already in your pocket.
It was an advantage and a disadvantage. I belong to a network of people where for some communities it was super successful to switch over to Zoom.
Who had the technology, who had the internet access?
People, a lot of dance studios are in suburban, more affluent communities than where my studio is. We're, a working class neighborhood. And we also, a lot of our families live in multi-generational households. There were, especially in our like younger children at the time of the pandemic, households that English was a second language, Polish and Spanish speaking households, households without internet. So, and people who, lived in condos, apartments, there was no space for their kid to take a dance class on a computer. That was the least of their concerns. And we scholarshiped a large portion of our population through the rest of that season from March to June. And it was so hard to work so hard, and people didn't even want it. They didn't know what it was or how to use it or how to access it. The kids that did, it made a huge impact for, but it was hard to reach everyone.
Yeah.
And by the end of the pandemic, we had gone from over 400 students to 25 students.
Wow.
So I rebuilt my business.
So talk about that. What was that like?
To rebuild it?
Yeah, or just to even face that, like to see the numbers dwindling and you're kind of panicking, but you're trying to keep cool and you're just like, oh shit.
Yeah.
This is getting real.
Yeah, it got real. I had put my own life, like my personal life, it was a huge risk. I put my mortgage on forbearance. I paid my entire staff their normal salaries all through to when their contract would have been up for June. And when the enrollments weren't coming back in over the summer, and then September came and they were still pretty low, I went back to grassroots. I walked, hit feet on the pavement in the heat, got my kids and some of their friends, and we're putting flyers on doors. So to have gone from being an established business to starting over and risking everything, of course, there were sleepless nights that I laid there and I thought, is this worth it? And there were a lot of conversations with God, like, hey, you called me to be here. I had a whole lot of other ideas of what I wanted to do with my life than own a dance studio on Belmont Ave. I was going to go do this and that and all these other things with my life. And every time I thought I was going to pivot my career, I got pulled back in, and not out of fear, but like a true sense of purpose and calling that I was needed. This was the work I was called to do. And I think that the response from my teenage students that summer when I first opened the doors back up, the tears and the joy to be able to move again, to have dance back, to see that so many of them who I didn't even know that they loved dance that much, like that was their thing. It was like a pivot for those kids, and to have them so vulnerably thank me and share, this changed my life. I don't know how I could have done this if I didn't get to keep dancing.
Well, you figure like they were totally stripped from creative expression, and now they have they find the value, right? Like young people will jump off of a building because they've never been hurt, and so you have a whole different frame of mind when you start kind of coming to that realization. And it's beautiful to see young people have that realization, because when they come back, I imagine that they're completely dedicated, and they become 10 times better and more responsible than they were before, because they see the value in what you were providing them.
It gave a lot of meaning. And I've never been a dance studio owner that disliked teaching or was, I'm done with teaching. Teaching fuels me. Teaching through all these years was the carrot I dangled in front of myself to figure out how to do spreadsheets and QuickBooks. And
yeah, we were talking about that
keep
earlier.
Things going. The teaching is what gives me life and energy. So I loved the teaching. I didn't mind. I didn't enjoy teaching on Zoom. Like, I'd much rather teach in person.
For sure.
The teaching carried me through, and then knowing that it mattered. And even if only 25 kids officially were signed up for that new season, I couldn't shut the doors. I was like, I don't know. And that was one of those, that was definitely a fork in the road moment, that late summer, fall. Like, okay, if you ever wanted to get rid of the studio, this would be the time to do it, because, well, there is nothing here but debt.
For sure.
I'd also say that post-pandemic and pushing through, I had an opportunity during that time to completely rebuild smarter. It was like if future me could have gone back 20 years and said, hey, just trust this, do that, don't do that, do this. So I got to rebuild faster than it took the first 15 years.
Well, yeah,
to
you
get
had
there.
The experience.
I had the experience, and for the first time, because I'd already lost everything, what else is there to lose? Like, literally, I was able to take risks that maybe the younger version of myself wouldn't have taken. I also was very grateful throughout the pandemic time. I took a leadership course, and the depth of self-reflection and personal development that went through this leadership course really helped me understand that it's not possible or sustainable to rebuild unless I do it together. And that's when I really shifted from being my hands in everything and doing everything myself, and I shifted my focus. I took all of my experience teaching and I flipped that into the mentorship of my young team that I built. I don't call it delegating.
No?
Equipping, empowering.
Okay.
That's
because there's still a
equipping
hierarchy.
and empowering. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not delegating. And I think the kind of stand up for myself moment that came out of all of that transition. There was, a divorce, a pandemic, my business was almost gone. What's left? I finally said, oh, wow, I'm going to actually let people do the job I'm paying them to do instead of having my hands a little in this and helping and trying to do everything yourself is not being a good leader.
No. You want to get the best out of everybody.
Mm-hmm. And I very much follow like a servant leadership model. I see myself as lifting everybody up, not standing on top of them down. Mm-hmm. And it's been so fulfilling and exciting to see the team that I have right now fly, and challenging because you have to let people make mistakes, and they're making mistakes on your dollar. Yeah. But the risk has been wonderful, and it's changed my relationship with the business. It was very empowering for me to learn how to hold people accountable. Mm-hmm. And I think that younger artists, not totally believing I was a business owner, I always referred to myself as a dance teacher, not the founder CEO of my company.
Yeah.
That a small business that's lasted 20 years, that's not nothing.
No, yeah, for sure. And then the other thing is, I was thinking about it. You create an intrinsic motivation for your staff when you give them say so in what's happening, and you let them make mistakes. Mm-hmm. Because if it's top down, they're only doing what you want them to do, and the attitude could be like, I'm just doing this because I'm being told to do this. It's not because I created this, right? Like I created this class, I created this curriculum or whatever is being created at the studio. You're giving them freedom to be able to grow themselves, and they find value and they see themselves in the work. That definitely makes them work harder. With students, when I was a teacher, I would give them rubrics, mm-hmm. and the rubrics were like, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, right? The moment that I changed that and I left it blank, and I was like, you fill it in. You learned all this stuff, you fill it in. And I compare the rubric that I would give the students and the rubric that they would hand in collectively as a class. They made their assignment 10 times harder. You know, like you were just like, yo, if I would have shown you this, you would have just shot for this. But like this class collectively made this 10 times harder. And because they find value in it. And, you know, then it's, how are you going to make them accountable, right? Like there has to be a way to check in with them where you're just not letting them just let go and then having them fail at the end. Like there has to be a way to monitor what's happening.
You know, it's a theme for me in my life. One of my senses of purpose with Forevermore is, we talk about this all the time as a team. Every child, every class, every time matters. Mm-hmm. People matter, and they need to know they matter. Mm-hmm. We talk about you belong. And that comes from a very deep place of, I've always been fiercely independent. I started working when I was 12. By the time I was 15, I was a manager of a restaurant. Like constantly doing my own thing, mm-hmm. starting things, the leader of this, like always.
And this was self-driven?
Self-driven.
Okay.
But I think it came from a sense of not belonging. And because I didn't belong, well, I'm going to make my own. Okay. And I think that ties into what you said. You are trying to make an impact and get people to understand that you can have a life outside of the box. Yeah, but for sure. You do have to be driven. You have to know. You have to be able to take the risk. Mm-hmm. And it's maybe ironic that I spend my life, you know, helping other people feel like they belong. But mm-hmm. that came out of something that was missing in my life. I didn't feel like I belonged mm-hmm. to any group.
Yeah.
Or particular family or like. Mm-hmm. So it's important to me. But definitely, who was I in high school? I don't know who I was. I kind of, I didn't belong.
Yeah, I don't think I did either. You know, like, but I was hip hop. That's the one thing that hip hop when I was growing up was not like super incredibly popular like it is right now, where it's ubiquitous with everything that's happening. It was like you were on the fringe of things, and you were like, it was like you had the punk kids, you had the rock kids, you had the hip hop kids. We were a small group, but there was a language that we all related with, and it just made me cool, and so you kind of carried that cool badge around. But how did you fall in love with dance?
How did I fall in love with dance?
And what was that experience like? Like like your dance story?
My dance story. My earliest memories are, like I said, standing in the circle, singing and dancing with the people singing their folk songs and guitars.
Okay.
I also put on little puppet shows, and I would convert my grandparents' garage into a theater. I made tickets and programs and set up the chairs and knocked on doors and invited people to come see.
How old?
6. My one-woman show.
What?
Oh, yeah.
That's wild. And that's what you do now.
I know.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a one-woman show.
But you know what I'm saying? Like the ticket sales,
absolutely. Like what was play for me was just innately who I was. But the like moment that I knew, like this was it, was probably around the time that I started putting on shows. My grandparents were definitely patrons of the arts. They had season tickets to different theaters throughout the suburbs and in the city, and they thought it was important to take me to go see things. And we went to go see West Side Story.
Ooh, my favorite.
And I remember sitting on the edge of the seat with my tiny little legs dangling, and I had black patent leather shoes.
Okay.
And I remember when the lights went down, and as they're going down, I could see like the colors glistening in my shoes. You could hear the candy wrappers.
Nice.
And the overture started, and I was like, and the curtain opened, and I was in awe, like absolute awe. I can remember like my heart jumping out of my chest. I just wanted to be up there with them. And I think a big part of my one-woman show was doing the monologue. I'd pretend I was holding the gun. How many bullets are left enough to kill you and you and you? And it's just this dramatic little kid. And what I was asking for was singing lessons. I wanted to be a star. I want to do that.
An actress.
And
a singer.
At the time, my grandparents couldn't find singing lessons for a 6-year-old. Okay. So they signed me up for ballet at the YMCA. And my grandfather took me every Saturday, and then we would roller skate afterwards.
That sounds fun.
And in ballet class, Mrs. Barbara, who had the long black skirt, and she looked like the stereotypical ballerina from the 70s, early 80s. We did this game, the ABCs of dance, and each letter we got to improvise something. It was like modern creative movement for little girls. And F was for falling. Every dancer needs to know how to fall. And she called on me and said, "Kerrie, do it again. That was a beautiful fall." So that was probably my early, like, oh, I can fall beautifully.
Yeah, like validation.
Yeah. And then by the time I was 9, I was given my first pair of pointe shoes. Back then they were called toe shoes, where you stand on your toes, and there was a bucket.
Yeah, the real deal.
If one fit you, you got to keep it. Nowadays, it's a very, very different experience. Children don't go on pointe until they're 12 to 15 years old because bones need to be fully developed. Man. There's fitters and a special shoe. It's like getting a wedding dress to get your first pair of pointe shoes. But back then, it was the bucket of toe shoes.
Okay.
And I was a natural. It was effortless for me to dance on my toes. However, I definitely always had my own style, and I wouldn't say lack of musicality, just a different way of hearing the music than the other dancers. And my thing was not blending in. I was not a chorus girl. I did not get the whole like
So everybody
unison.
would be moving away, and then you would be moving a different way.
My mom's husband, who is on hospice right now, their first date was going to one of my dance recitals. And he would tell this story probably every couple years to tease me. He goes, I'll never forget the tap dance, and everybody went ta-da, ta-da, ta-da one way, and I went the opposite direction.
Nice.
The shortest one at the end of the line.
Did you do it on purpose, or just was natural?
No, I was just so
into
it.
Okay.
Yeah. And then when I was in high school, I had my heart broken. There were auditions for the dance team, and there was basically like a varsity and JV. And I was already a very good dancer by high school. I had been teaching dance already. And my English teacher was the coach, and there had been auditions. And I guess the varsity had to do POMs and stuff too. And then the lower level team only did one concert, but the other team competed and did all sorts of stuff. Anyways, she held me after class, and I thought she was going to tell me that I made it. And she said, before the results come out, I just want to let you know that I'm not able to put you on the advanced team. And I looked at her and I said, why? And she said, you're an extremely talented dancer, but you just don't blend in.
Whoa.
And I could have said, I'm done, and I was like, I don't blend in? Okay, do my own thing. And that continued in college. I had a modern dance teacher, and college was the first time I really got super exposed to modern dance, even though I'd been a modern dancer since I was 6 with my F for fall down. I had a professor in college who talked about how each of the iconic legends of modern dance had their own way of doing things. That's how something new was created, like contemporary art. You take the classic and you make it your own, and you have your own voice. And that was the moment that I'm like, that's what I am. I am a choreographer, and someday there will be the Kerrie technique.
Nice.
And that's my dance story. I got a BFA. It took me 10 years to do my undergraduate, and that's a whole another story.
So the same amount of years it took me.
And I don't regret a moment of it, because that was my journey.
Yeah. So what happened?
Oh, what happened? A lot happened. I moved to Iowa and owned a dance studio. I lived in Paris and danced there. Then moved back to Chicago and finished my degree where I'd started my degree, and then moved to New York. And I moved to New York September 5th, 2001.
Okay.
So just a few days before 9/11.
Before 9/11,
yeah.
Yes.
Which was another huge fork in the road for me and my choices in dance. And I feel like...
How did that impact you, 9/11? And because if you're it's your introduction.
It was my introduction to being on my own, moving to the big city with just a suitcase to make it. And I was already a little older than most people leaving with the suitcase for New York. Everybody back home, just come home. You don't need to be there. You don't even have a place to live. And I was like, no, I think I was meant to be here. I was profoundly impacted by the experience of being there. I don't think it was on accident. It was definitely a part of my journey. I got to witness a few days of the most energized, crazy, chaotic place I'd ever seen that I thought was fabulous and beautiful. And I'd lived in Paris. I was from Chicago, but New York was wow. And 9/11 happened, and it was silence. And then, magical, in the midst of all of this sorrow and grief and fear, it was people opened their doors and came out. And all these people that had been walking around with blinders on, the blinders were down, and people were just people who would never have talked to each other, stopped and had conversations that mattered. And I thought, I can't imagine not having had experienced that humanity. And I also then got to witness all of the hate that ensued. And then I had my own bit of struggle because trying to find work when everything had kind of shut down and collapsed.
It's crazy that you've experienced this 2 shutdown situation.
Yeah, I have not. That's the first time I've made the connection. That's interesting. Yeah. I got very lucky as an artist, and at the time I had no idea how lucky I was. I got cast in a contract with a small modern dance company that paid like $500 a week. So to like sign that contract was epic. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And we did these amazing residencies where we would work with diverse populations. We worked with inmates, women in prison. We worked with corporate America, with a blind dancer on our team to teach diversity training. We worked in all sorts of interfaith situations, and we would do pieces where we'd have a residency where we would add the population that we were working with into our dance. So it was concert dance, some of our own pieces, and then this like collaborative project that we would make. Yeah. And I got to use my teaching skills, I got to use my choreography skills, and I got paid to tour and dance in a very unique setting, in something that really mattered. Yeah. I mean, I thought I was going to go be in Broadway shows, and instead I went out and did dance therapy and healing work. And
that's a cool story, though.
It's very cool. My experience, like the artist side of me through COVID, didn't exist. And it's funny because my mom one time told me, because I was complaining, it was a very angsty time for me because I didn't have a creative outlet. And my mom kept reminding me, all of the solutions you're coming up with, that is creativity, Kerrie. I'm like, but I'm not making art. I don't have a voice. I don't have a way to express. Like, it was very suffocating because I wasn't choreographing. I wasn't just dancing. I was trying to figure out technology. I was trying to make sure there was enough food on the table. And to navigate, as we did open, all of the rules and we talked earlier about polarity. It was a very, very challenging time. The population that I serve is very polarized. Not everyone is like-minded. And COVID brought out not just the medical and pandemic type polarities, but we went through all of the social injustice polarities. And it was hard. I serve a lot of city workers, firemen, police officers, because they need the Chicago zip code, so they live right around there. Yeah, and this battle between Blue Lives Matters, Black Lives Matters. Young teachers working for me at the time who didn't think that I was liberal because I wanted to stay open. Like, I should just stay shut down indefinitely, not come up with solutions to figure out how to do this. And never once did I do anything not safe or technically breaking the rules. I got creative with how some of the rules happened. At one point, our capacity changed. And instead of canceling, we created a rotating schedule so that only 3 people were in the classroom at a time. And some had to Zoom and some could be in person. And
hybrid, yeah.
Yeah. But the spreadsheets and the epicness of like trying to figure out how to do that, and then to have some staff that felt I was potentially making them murderers because I'm trying to teach dance. I'm like, nobody has to come if they don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but the people who want to come,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying. Yeah, it was a tough time.
It has to have been tough. I mean, for me, it's like, I think it's like coming out of the pandemic and like seeing, the political gamut here in Chicago with the elections that just happened. It's just like, especially social media was driven through polarization.
Mm-hmm.
So if you leaned one way, you were flooded with information about that vantage point. If you leaned another way, you were flooded by, and you never got like the middle ground. It was always like extreme. And so I started seeing that extreme, and I was just like, yo, I wasn't feeling it. I was like, yo. So it was like I stopped engaging with social media the same way that I was engaging with social media before. But yeah, man, it had people super nervous. Well, because I was reading about the yellow fever and like how long it would have taken. It was like 2 years that it decimated the population, but it decimated the population that was vulnerable. But then who's vulnerable? Like, is my mother-in-law vulnerable, right? Like, I didn't want to get my mother-in-law. It was like there was so much going on, and so many people made so much money off of it. You know, like you figure it's like, you know, conspiracy theorists will talk whatever they want to talk about, but the money there was the 3M factory making these masks somehow. Like it was wild. Like there was a lot going on, and I would figure that if you're a business person and you just find yourself in a place where it's like you're the only one selling a product, like a vaccine, and you don't need to give that recipe to anybody, then you can just do whatever you need to do. And the crazy part is that that vaccine was made with tax money. So it's just like, man, it's wild what was happening. And it 9/11 had to have been the same way, right? Like some people benefited from that in some way. Where were you living at the time?
I was in the city.
You were in Manhattan?
Yeah. I saw.
You saw it? Wow.
Saw the smoke in the sky. Saw towers fall.
Whoa.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. So it must have hit you way different to like,
witness it.
Yeah, because you're looking at the TV and then you look in your window and you're just like, oh.
You know, I by no means do I consider myself desensitized to trauma. However, I think that I am resilient. Mm-hmm. I've experienced a lot of trauma throughout my life.
Yeah.
And so sad. Mm-hmm. And again, the empath, like to feel, but then to see the glimmers of hope, just a phenomenal experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to see the flowers kind of come back up.
Yeah.
How do you balance the business side of your business and the artistic side of your business? Because that's a duality, you know, where you're just like, you want to teach dance and you want to keep dancing yourself, but then you also have to manage this business and you have to be an entrepreneur. And we were talking about it, like do the QuickBooks and make sure that your accounting is going well and your books are where they need to be at, because if you get audited, that's going to be a really big problem. So how do you do that? And how did you get yourself into a place to learn that if you didn't know that? Or weren't leaning towards that side of business?
A lot of mistakes. It took me a long time to figure out how to balance it. And I don't know that well, it's tricky. Balance is a beautiful topic for a dancer. Like, what do? We stand on one leg and balance. Mm-hmm. But balance is not stillness. Mm-hmm. Balance is a constant give and take.
Mm-hmm.
So in order for the business side to thrive, sometimes I've got to really lean far that side. In order for the artistic side, sometimes I've got to let some things start to drop. I think for many years, I valued the art so much more than I valued the business. They say that business is people and math. I didn't like math in school.
Yeah.
So what the heck am I doing running a business if a business is people and math? But I eventually really embraced the idea that there is no mission without money. You cannot fulfill your mission unless you are being financially responsible. And as soon as you make the agreement to serve others as a leader, that I'm going to give this person a paycheck for their efforts, we're trading, time and money, what is valued. It became my fiduciary responsibility to, I better be good at math. I'm good at people. I love people. I'm a people person. The math was hard, and it took a long time. I also learned that I'm not good at everything. It's very egotistical to think that I'm going to be good at everything. I'm competent. Most solopreneurs, entrepreneurs are competent because you have to. But you get to scale and thrive and grow when you find people who are better at the things you're not good at than you are. So it's another balancing act through the years, learning how to get good at the things that you have to get good at because you have to, but then also knowing when to let go and find somebody who's better at it so that it can scale and grow.
Yeah. And so did you let all of those people, like your accountant or those people that would do a better job during the pandemic, did you let them go? And then what was it like rebuilding that after the pandemic?
I did not let go of anyone.
Wow.
Which is probably partly how I succeeded. I didn't give up. The things I gave up were my personal comforts. And again, the balance, the artist in me during COVID suffered. I would see posts about people going off and making art or, having this beautiful nature escape. And it made me angry. And I'm not an angry person. I was angry. I was so pissed off that I didn't have the opportunity to just be. And I'd already been running on fumes, trying to recover from a divorce. I'd had my own health scare right as COVID was happening. There was a lot on my plate. Yeah. And instead of getting to go turn inward and be introspective and make art and feel good and commune with the I was, shit, how do I do this? Yeah. It was hard, and I was pretty burnt out. And by the time we really recovered, I was not in good health. I had gained a lot of weight, and I'd had a cancer scare, and I was tired, and it hurt. Both of my ankles and feet were so riddled with inflammation that I'd have to crawl to the bathroom in the morning.
Wow.
And that summer, the year after COVID, and things had recovered enough, we had two different students of mine whose parents were my age passed away kind of suddenly, unexpectedly, and to go watch these kids that I watched grow up grieve, and to see, in a casket, people my age leaving their children behind. That was the whoa, whoa, like, no. And, I prided myself on being a mentor and role model, but what are you modeling to my own children and to all these beautiful young girls and young women that I'm teaching if I'm not loving myself, if I'm not taking care of me? My tank's empty. I'm burnt out. I'm going to be in a casket soon. Man. And then I'm not serving my calling.
Man.
And the studio doesn't matter like at all if you're dead.
For sure.
And I made a commitment to get healthy. And I was getting that, it was like leading up to turning 50, and I was committed, and I'm so grateful to be on a health journey and to really understand that it's not about losing weight. It was
not having diabetes and not having
and
cholesterol.
To understand that I gained weight because I was so stressed, and that it doesn't matter how hard you diet or exercise if the stress is still there. That it was really a period of time of going inward, being committed to continuing a gratitude practice, to meditate, to know that everything I do is a choice. Like every moment of your life is a choice. We get to choose. We get to choose happy. We get to choose healthy. We get to choose who we are. And that's the legacy I want to leave behind. That's what I want to inspire and teach people beyond just dancing.
Yeah.
And the arts.
And what do you want to leave people with as far as, like you kind of touched on that, but what else do you want to leave people with in Forevermore, or, any other aspect of your life?
Well, it's called Forevermore because I believe that when somebody gets to dig in and have that self-actualization that comes through the arts, that it will stick with you forevermore. I know that as an arts educator, whether it's dance, theater, music, most kids that I'm teaching will not grow up and be stars or professionals. I think in dance, it's like maybe 1 out of every 200 kids will do anything related to the industry, no matter how talented they are. So, and I learned that 20 years ago. Before I even started this, I didn't go into it to make stars. I went into it wanting to create competent artists who could go to college or have a career, that they were getting up something of value in their education. But I knew that's not what this is about. This is about creating future audiences for my art forms that I love so much. And it's about creating critical thinkers. It's about creating problem solvers. It's about creating people who believe in themselves. And I don't have to be gone to know that my legacy is actually already actualized at Forevermore. And I think it's leaving me at age 50 and 20 years into the business, not wanting to leave my business, but I'm definitely at a if I could do it there, could I do it on a bigger scale? How else could I help people? Dance was a great place to start. And now I'm like raising up the next generation of teachers. And I'm excited to figure out what's next for me. I know I'd like to write. I think I would like the opportunity to speak to audiences outside of my dance studio about just the difference that our energy makes in the world around us, and that everybody does matter. Like the energy that you bring matters. And that the arts are certainly one way of bringing that to life, but it doesn't have to be the arts. It's whatever somebody's passionate about. It's about finding intrinsic motivation to have a sense of purpose in life.
For sure. I mean, that's what boxing does. So I'm a boxer. And so boxing gives you discipline. So does dancing, right? Because you have to be on class on time.
Yep.
You have to suffer through injury and like learn how your body works. And so it gives you like a grit that, you know, you could get other places, but, you know, like I imagine that dance gives you that grit, that discipline, that like, I'm committed to this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go outside my comfort zone to find out how to do this because I'm committed to this. And so it makes the people or the youth that go into your studios, like you said, they may not end up being like the boxers that box in my boxing gym may not become professionals, but they're going to be able to transfer the skills that they're learning in the boxing gym somewhere else in business or in the jobs that they may have. That disappointment comes with that, you know, like 2 years ago I fought in the Golden Gloves. No, I think it was 3 years ago. I've been fighting every year. I fought this year, but last year I won the championship. But the year before that, I think I was injured. I was injured and I had hyperextended my elbow. Ooh. So it was just like constant healing, constant injured, constant healing, constant injured, where you felt like it was okay to use it and then you would overdo it and then it would send you back. And it's just like, it makes, I imagine that's what happens in dance, where it's like you're pulling a hamstring, you're pulling a quad, and like you have to like deal with that and like figure out how to do that. And that has to be an incredible learning experience for young people.
It's one of the hardest things to teach somebody is how to listen to their body. Because nobody knows what it feels like to be you.
Yeah.
And I think it's a challenge that a lot of dance educators are facing right now. Kids don't play on the playground and outside or climb trees like they used to. They're all in their devices.
So their tendons aren't ready for
their
the
bodies.
stress.
Like the difference between the physical ability, just their gross locomotor skills are delayed.
Yeah.
And
with the pandemic, it's even worse.
Weakened immune systems, a lot of injury. The diet that the typical American has, even if they think they're eating healthy, are they really fueling their bodies to do what's asked? But then to actually like excel in dance, sometimes you have to be uncomfortable. And teaching a child to learn the difference between how to rest and heal and how to push through, it's that's one of the greatest lessons I think that we learn from a sport or of any sort, because that's what it takes to get up and show up when you have a cold. Like the pandemic, ever just hide, don't push through what's hard.
Yeah.
But on the other side of pushing through, there's extraordinary things, and you don't ever achieve excellence if you don't get uncomfortable sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. And you were talking about you were standing on your toes. Like I imagine your toes suffered a whole lot.
Oh yeah, they get bloody and blistered and.
Does anything happen to your bones in your toes?
I was very lucky that I didn't get damage, because they didn't know what they know now. Like I said, I started when I was 9. Now it's like 12 to 15 years old. If somebody's bones aren't developed and they don't have the correct muscle development around the skeleton, yes, you can damage, like permanent damage. I think of it a little bit like, the Chinese binding of the feet. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Why would you purposely harm a child?
Yeah.
And it's not okay.
Like if you listen to Mondo's podcast, he was talking about how the tendons in his fingers aren't the same. And he's like, he's not at the level that he was at before because he kind of lost some sensitivity in that. So I would imagine that happens in dance as well.
Oh, definitely. There's a lot of potential for injury from overuse, or the body's extraordinary. And as an athlete, you can probably relate to this, but our bodies will do everything to keep us safe. Mm-hmm. So as a young dancer's trying to figure out how to make these shapes, they don't know that if they're misaligned, if their skeleton's not stacked the way it should be, that their brain is going to, like Jenga, pull all the pieces apart to make them balance. Oh, look, I'm balancing. And if you repetitively balance in the wrong way, a shape that's not stacked, like your joints aren't properly aligned, you're going to have injury. And then you start jumping and turning, and you do it over and over and over again. That's why training and technique is so important. Like martial arts, a lot of emphasis on form in dance for proper alignment and injury prevention.
One of the things that artists do is, like, or for me at least, I want to learn as much as I can in this lifetime. And so during the pandemic, I learned how to DJ. It's something that I've always wanted to learn how to do. So it's just like being able to see the matrix, and then looking at fights, like professional fights, and like seeing what you didn't understand. You were just seeing two people fight, but now you're seeing the nuances of what they were doing to each other, how they were playing chess the whole time. And we think of it as a brutal sport, but when you start breaking like, he was bobbing his head, he was making him miss, he was countering him when he was doing this, he was feinting, he was making him react and counter punching him. It's amazing when you get to like see it from a different perspective. But I don't know if I would have been prepared as a young person to be focused like that. I think it took those years off and coming back and realizing I had to change something, or else I was going to keep getting beat up. Like something has to change. I'm not faster than this guy, so I have to do something to counter his fastness. And that means retraining myself. What would you tell, like, or how can you give insight of like what dance is, or what dance is to you, or like things that I wouldn't know about dance, things that only people who dedicate their life to dance know?
Ooh.
Okay.
Like, so you want my matrix insight into dance?
Yeah.
Well, I'll start with like zoom way out. If you think about, most people don't study ballet, but everybody has a chance to go see a ballet or a modern dance concert. Or when people go watch abstract dance, there's kind of a disconnect if you don't dance, unless the performer is exchanging energy that the audience feels. Somebody who hasn't trained has no idea what's going on that stage. And I think my first like bit of insight into the matrix is when you watch dance, let yourself feel it. How does it feel? Not judging it, not giving it any labels, just to be able to observe what you see and how it makes you feel, and that it doesn't have to make sense. There's a lot of dance that does not have a story. It's abstract. It is it could be somebody looked at cup and said, I'm going to make my body round and I'm going to fill it with something and I'm going to drink it. And that's what you're looking at up on stage.
Yeah.
And if you're not a dancer and you're like, oh yeah, feel the cup, or oh, they're making such a beautiful shape, and oh, I get it. or I could do that, or their body, their technique is so beautiful. So for the non-dancer watching it, it doesn't always mean something. Sometimes it means nothing.
Yeah.
I know it's a little nihilistic. Life is meaningless, and it's meaningless that life is meaningless. But not all dance is telling a story, but all dance is transmitting energy. They're projecting a performance that an audience gets to take in, like listening to music. If you're listening to music that doesn't have lyrics, how does it make you feel? Dance doesn't have words. The music they're dancing to may have words, and they may be interpreting the words, and then your meaning-making machine can go crazy. But so from the zoomed out lens, when you're watching dance, watch it without judgment. Just experience
it, yes.
Experience how it makes you feel. And it's kind of like the scenes in the movie when people listen to opera for the first time. If you actually let yourself just be present to the gift that somebody is sharing, it can change you. Dance can move people to tears. And the performer and the choreographer have a collaboration. It's like, the choreographer is the artist and the dancer's the paint, but it's paint that's alive and is changing every moment. Every breath we take, we're new.
Yeah.
Every time our heart pumps, there's something new. Dance is never the same. It's live, it's living. And I think it's such an extraordinary, exciting thing to watch somebody share what's inside of them that's beyond words.
Yeah, and then the other thing is like they're sharing their vitality, because even in sport, right? Like you're leaving something in the ring, like you're leaving something on the dance floor or the stage, right? Like you're leaving something. You're diminishing your muscles in a way to share a message or a feeling to people. There's a exchange there, like a sacrifice.
Absolutely. And I've always loved people watching of any kind. To me, all of life is a dance. The way nature moves, the way people move, whether
they walk, the way that they walk. Everybody has their own style of walk.
I think something else to really look into dance, to be able to know that a stage is just empty space. A dancer comes into that space, and it's sacred space. They are taking nothing but themselves and filling it, and filling a whole theater or a whole room, or if they're outside, up to the sky with all their energy. I think, and then the flip side of that, so that's all like the observer, the audience member, but just like all people sing, all people drum, we have a heartbeat, all people dance. Everyone dances. And it's funny because you felt pressured as a child having to demonstrate and do it perfectly. That's not the purpose of dance. Dance isn't intended to be done perfectly. Like everybody does dance. Everybody sings. We all breathe. That mankind has been dancing around the fire. There's cave paintings of us dancing. It's innate.
Movement. It's movement. It's organized movement. It's like conscious movement.
I had seen something cute that was talking about how unison movement and why we find it so fascinating to watch people move in synchronization is actually part of our primitive brain, that primitive people used to come together and move in unison to look bigger to a predator.
I get you.
So that's part of what is satisfying to us, something so primal, like back to our ancestors. We appreciate unison movement because that saves your life.
For sure.
Like,
wow,
that's
I didn't know that.
So cool.
Yeah, I mean, animals do that. You see that all the time with animals.
Yep.
With the fish.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, crazy.
Mm-hmm.
How can people reach out to you if they would like to know more about Forevermore or any of the other things that you're doing?
We have a website, forevermorearts.com, and we do lessons in dance, theater, and music. And we're right here in Chicago on Belmont Ave with programming for ages 2 through teens, and every now and then adults, but adults don't always stick with it. So if we get enough adults, we definitely get programming started. And be on the lookout. I had committed to writing a book this year, so maybe that'll exist.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for making it to the 500 and Growing podcast. So my daughter takes guitar lessons. My 2 daughters do dance, and it's an incredible performance that you create, experience that you create for parents, and you're definitely very valued in the community. And thank you for sticking it out. Thank you very much for coming to the 500 and Growing podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. And same thing I say at the end of every show to all of the parents. Thank you for sharing your children with us.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, thank you very much. We are the 500 and Growing podcast. We have Kerrie Anne Grace. And if you want to see the studio, or you want to have music classes or dance classes or theater classes, and the theater is incredible as well, please reach out to Forevermore. And you have the website. And thank you very much, Kerrie.
Yay.
500 and growing.
Podcast. Dedicated to the underdog, cause I see you working on your craft, getting strong, cause I see you ready to set it off and on, cause I see you correcting all that is wrong, cause I see you dedicated to your craft, read and study the math, making goals and taking a stand, original so you trailblaze a path, in tune with your inner master plan, footworking through the obstacles of life, sticking and moving, what's not right, keeping it peace, but ready to fight, protecting and keeping your light bright, in your eye and your mind, illuminating the blind, seeing the signs, so brothers and sisters, get on your grind, get on your grind, get up off those knees, this is the time, we find ourselves, improve our health, and never settle, take it into a higher level, sound mind growth is mental, purposeful movements, never accidental.
Please like, share, and subscribe. Follow at 500 and Growing Podcast on Instagram for updates, and also visit 500andgrowing.com for more creative